Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. You may remember that the church honors people not on their birthdays, but on their death days. The day of a person's death is considered the day of their birth in heaven, and that's what is important, at least for the church. For us, it is important for us to mark the date of Martin Luther's death, and he is commemorated on February 18th. However, I'm not going to talk about him. Luther is well known, and his story is much too long and much too complex to talk about it adequately in the time we have. In fact, I subscribe to a magazine about Christian history, and they published an issue about Luther's early life and then another issue about his later life, the only person in more than 20 years of this magazine that they had to dedicate 2 issues to. So maybe some other time I'll plan a week or 2 just to talk about Luther. This week I'm following the lead I began in January of focusing on the men and women the church commemorates and remembers as great examples of faith. The Lutheran Church doesn't really highlight specific saints. Our thought is that God makes us all saints in God's grace. Nevertheless, we do remember certain people who did great things so that they can inspire us to a bold witness in our own faith. One of those we remember in February is Rasmus Jensen, who was the first Lutheran pastor in North America. In the spring of 1619, King Christian IV of Norway and Denmark sent an expedition consisting of 2 ships, the Unicorn and the Lamprey, and 64 men to North America to search for the Northwest Passage to India. The chaplain of the expedition was Rasmus Jensen, who became the first Lutheran pastor in the New World. Little is known of his life. The expedition was under the leadership of the most traveled and experienced officer in the Danish Navy, Jens Munk. The ships left Denmark on May 9th, touched the coast of Greenland, reached the North American shore on July 8th, crossed the Hudson Bay, where the explorers named the area Nova Dania, New Denmark, and landed at the mouth of a river on the western shore of the Hudson Bay at what is now Manitoba. Locked in ice for the long winter, the explorers made the first settlement of Lutherans in the New World. The captain wrote in his journal, "On the 24th of December, which was Christmas Eve, I gave the men wine and strong beer, which they had to boil afresh, for it was frozen at the bottom. And so they had quite as much as they could stand, and were very jolly, but no one offended another with as much as a word. The holy Christmas day we all celebrated and observed solemnly, as a Christian's duty is. We had a sermon and mass, and after the sermon we gave the priest an offertory, according to ancient custom, each in proportion to his means. There was not much money among the men, but they gave what they had. Some of them gave white fox skins, so that the priest got enough wherewith to line a coat. However, sufficiently long life to wear it was not granted to him. During all the holy days the weather was rather mild, and in order that the time might not hang on hand, the men practiced all kinds of games, and whoever could imagine the most amusement was the most popular. The crew, most of whom were at that time in good health, consequently had all sorts of larks and pastimes, and thus we spent the holy days with the merriment that was got up." The foreboding that shadows Monk's narrative was fulfilled, and soon most of the members of the crew were attacked by scurvy and died. Monk continues, "On the 23rd of January died one of my 2 mates, Hans Bruck by name, who had been ill in and out of bed for nearly 5 months. On the same day it was fine weather and a beautiful sunshine, and the priest sat up in his berth and gave the people a sermon, which sermon was the last he delivered in this world. On the 20th of February in the evening died the priest, Mr. Rasmus Jensen, aforesaid, who had been ill and had kept his bed a long time. On the 14th of April there was a sharp frost. On that day only 4 besides myself had strength enough to sit up in the berth and listen to the homily for Good Friday. On the 16th of April was Easter Day. Then died Anders Orust and Jens, the cooper, who had been ill and had been in bed for a long time, and as the weather was fairly mild, I got their bodies buried. On the same day I prompted my captain of the hold to be skipper, although he was ill, in order that he might assist me somewhat as far as his strength allowed, because I was myself then quite miserable and abandoned by all the world, as everybody may imagine. Monk himself had become deathly sick, but eventually recovered. With the last 2 remaining sailors, he set sail in July in the smaller of the 2 vessels, the Lamprey, and reached Norway in September and arrived in Copenhagen on Christmas Day, 1620. He published a diary of his voyage in Danish in 1624. An English translation appeared in 1897. It is a moving and melancholy account of hardship, death, and bravery. A memorial to the expedition has been erected at Port Churchill, an island in the Canadian Northwest Territories at the head of the Fox Basin, northwest of Baffin Island, is named Monk Island in honor of the explorer. After this disheartening experience in Canada, Danish missionary activity was concentrated in India and the Virgin Islands. By 1656, a Lutheran pastor, the second in the New World, Magister Lawrence Anderson Rhodius, was ministering to the tobacco-producing islands of the West Indies, and Kjeld Jensen Slagelts, on January 8, 1665, became pastor at St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, where a strong Lutheran tradition has been maintained. He died in June of 1672. In 1917, the Danish Virgin Islands passed into the control of the United States. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.